The last time they were seen was by a neighbor and by my cousin who was bringing home her niece from church. They was outside playing. It is a sorrow that never leaves. It is one of the worst feelings anybody could ever have. It's like a part of you is gone. And I don't feel complete, anymore. I'm lost.
A distraught mother that has been worrying and praying for an answer to the question, where are my two children, for over 12 years. And a mystery that throws an X factor into this case that half the audience is probably going to think one outcome and the other half is going to think another. But we have experts saying one of those two possibilities just isn't possible. It's time to turn on the searchlight for Christopher Gage Daniel and Chloie Leverette. Welcome back to Brain Scratch Searchlight. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending time with me and for caring about these cases like I do. This is one that I just did not see coming, and thank you to the Brain Scratcher that suggested this using the suggestions form over at lordenarts.com. Let's jump into the first of two NamUs profiles we're going to be looking at. This one for Christopher Daniel, a white Caucasian male. Date of last contact, September 23rd, 2012. That was at 7 years old. He would now be 19 years old. He's missing from an area around Unionville, Tennessee. We'll talk more about that as we get into the details here. But let's see. Nickname is Gage. He also has kind of a family nickname, which is Buster. At the time he went missing, he was standing at about 4 feet tall and weighing about 50 pounds. For circumstances of disappearance, we don't get a whole lot. Christopher and his sister Chloie were last seen at home on September 23rd, 2012 at approximately 6:30 p.m. Now, the 6:30 p.m. is basically a confirmation from someone outside the family that saw them at that time. I believe it was a neighbor. And worth noting, both Christopher and his sister are living with their grandparents during this time. Outside of that, we have nothing in terms of very simple description: brown hair, hazel eyes. We have nothing for physical features. I don't believe we have no clothing description. And they don't really even have medical information here, which is kind of interesting because he has a particular condition known as Dandy Walker syndrome. And it's basically a disability that will affect motor skills and speech. So I'm curious why that isn't listed here at NamUs, but you can see this profile is pretty bare bones. Thankfully, there was a lot of coverage on this case when it happened, and there is coverage about annually. There's still an update touch that happens with this case. Unfortunately, not a lot more details, and I think when we get into the big crux of this mystery, you're going to understand why. But let's take a look at his sister Chloe's NamUs pages as well. Chloie Leverette, a white Caucasian female, date of last contact, same day, same time, missing at the age of 9. She would now be 21 years old, which raises a big question right off the bat. I mean, we are talking about the possibility of a child abduction that happened here. If one of them is now 21 years old, theoretically, would they be out of the situation where they were being controlled? Would they be living their own life? Would they be able to establish contact with law enforcement and say, no, I'm here, I'm fine, even if there is something where they don't want to be back in contact with their mother? Couldn't they just call it into law enforcement to basically get this is a full-blown Amber Alert. It's one of the longest running Amber Alerts in Tennessee. They could get all that shut down with a simple phone call to law enforcement. And we have them both entering their adult years now. So, of course, for some of us, that makes the possibility that they're no longer alive a little bit stronger, but who knows? We've seen stories where, people aren't found for decades, sometimes well into adulthood, and on a few occasions, even into their elderly ages where they've been located. Let's continue here. So missing at the age of 9, current age 21. No nicknames noted for her here, and I didn't really run into any, although she does sometimes go by a different last name. We're going to hit that in one of the articles. I believe it's Pope, if I'm recalling correctly. She was 5 foot 8 inches tall at the time that she went missing, around 75 pounds. Circumstances of disappearance exactly the same as the last one. Again, not a whole lot of description, just brown hair, blue eyes, no clothing information. And I haven't run into any medical information in terms of her as well. We can see there's a couple of age progressions. There's been numerous age progressions, so we're going to scroll all of them down below, right up to the most current one, so that we get all the different looks out there that might be helpful in terms of helping this case. So what is the big crux of this mystery? 2 kids missing since house fire Sunday. So rolling back to September of 2012, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation issued an endangered child alert for 2 children. The kids lived with their grandparents in Unionville, but that home was destroyed by fire at 9:30 p.m. Sunday. So we know the independent source that saw them was at 6:30. The fire takes out the house at 9:30 that evening. Fire investigators say the children were not victims of the fire, but they have not been seen since. And that's where the biggest conversation point about this case, the biggest thing that I see in terms of social media conversation on this case, ping pongs back and forth, is the possibility that no, they were actually victims of the fire. There was just no remains left because the fire got so hot that effectively they were cremated. There's experts we're going to run into in terms of these articles that are saying, a house fire essentially would not get that hot. There are other people that talk about the cremation process and say, it's not just a fire for a few hours at a certain temperature. Like, that is a prolonged, extremely high temperature that's needed for cremation. And apparently there are certain parts of the body that even survive that. If it's an actual cremation being done by a funeral home or something, like, they will grind those parts up after the burning process. So this is a big consideration with this case. We're talking about a serious fire. And I've found some old articles. I was trying to get an idea of how big this house was. One that I found in particular said this might have been a 5,000 square foot house, which would have been a very large house. This is on a parcel of land that I believe is 23 acres. So we're talking about a really big piece of land as well. It's kind of in a rural farm area. It's known for people that are raising horses and things of that nature. And that's why I was kind of pointing out the Unionville thing. It's actually in an unincorporated area called Rover that is, I don't know if it's part of Unionville or on the outskirts of it, but this is the road that the home was on, just to give you a little bit of a sense of the type of area this is. So we're talking just lots and lots of land, some brush, but not a whole lot of trees. And of course, it raises a question right off the bat. I mean, what could start a fire that's going to take a whole house down? And this house was apparently leveled within a matter of hours. So are there conditions that we're going to find that might explain that? There's one in particular I'm thinking of that might contribute to it. But a big question in this, and a question that would help answer things very quickly, is this arson? Because if this is a case of arson, if they have an investigator that's there and they're like, yes, we can confirm this is arson, the possibility of the children being taken from this situation goes up exponentially. Are we going to find that answer? Let's continue going through the sources here. And let's start with, there isn't even a Wikipedia article for Rover. I did find this blog by Wanderlustful. So I just want to share the limited information that they were able to find. They kind of ran into this place on accident during a road trip. But this is Rover unincorporated. And basically what they learned about it is it's not much. Here's a street and here's all that's left of it. They're saying this is pretty much all that's there. Carlton's General Store. We can see the general store is boarded up. And they said behind the store, there is a house, there's a barn, and there's outbuildings, and the house is occupied. There's people that live in this area. Even if you go walking around on Google Maps, you can see the homes are kept up. They're beautiful homes. And even in Google Maps, you're seeing vehicles everywhere. You can see some people outside. So this is certainly a place. And it's not far from Unionville. It's not far. I think this is only about 45 miles outside of Nashville. So there are people that are living there, just not much for services, obviously. There are a few houses close by, neighbors. No doubt they know each other well. There's been a published history of Rover interestingly, but that was more than 10 years ago, and no trace of it exists online. So there's really nothing else we can learn about the area. And I'm just curious about it because what is the dynamic or the component that could really help support the thought that there was an abduction that happened in an area like this? I mean, you barely have a few homes. Yes, I think all the neighbors know each other here. Kingdom Road does not look like some kind of main highway. Interestingly, Wanderlustful, they did kind of run into it that way. They were driving through essentially to get somewhere else. But in that case, like, you're not going to have someone driving down the street and some house that's back off the street where there's an elderly couple living with their grandchildren. Like, how's that person going to know, okay, that's the house we're going to go into. We're going to abduct 2 children. We're going to burn it down. Like, there's a lot of elements of this that are really difficult to understand. And unfortunately, when it comes to the social information around this, there's not a lot to support it. Like, I'm curious about knowing the type of area this is. And we're talking about people in their 70s. Were they doing anything in terms of farming? Is there a possibility that there would have been helpers, that there would have been people that were coming by regularly that would maybe come to know about the children, and maybe something happened along those lines? And unfortunately, I just could not find anything to really help fill in those gaps in knowledge and give us an understanding of, if we are looking for a suspect or trying to profile someone that would be responsible for this abduction, like, who would it be? What type of person would this be that could pull this off in this way? Continuing at the Daily Herald, even as cadaver dogs continued their search of the Leon and Molly McLaren home on Kingdom Road near Rover, state investigators said 9-year-old Chloie Leverette and 7-year-old Gage Daniel may be alive. According to state bomb and arson investigators, the children were not victims of the fire, and their whereabouts are unknown at this time, said a TBI press release. The state fire marshal's office said in a statement that it is concluded that there are no remains of the 2 children in the structure. The children's location at this time is unknown. But we did have a spokeswoman for TBI, Kristen Helm. She said that there's no evidence that the children were not in the house. It's an interesting phrasing, and I know some of you out there are saying, you can't prove a double negative. I think this is just badly worded. I think she's basically just saying they don't have any confirmation of the children being seen outside the house after that point. I think that would have been a better phrasing for this. No potential sightings, no one saying, oh, at the gas station, I saw someone driving through, there was 2 kids in the back of the car. Nothing like that I think would give the TBI some more insight into, hey, there's a chance those kids actually are outside of the house. But arson investigators, state fire marshal's office, they're saying there's no remains for the children in that house. District Attorney Robert Carter asked the agency to investigate the fatal fire and the whereabouts of the children, Helm told the Associated Press. Under an abundance of caution, we decided to issue an endangered child alert for the 2 children if they are not, in fact, found in the fire, Helm said. So it almost sounds like a little bit of backtracking on the endangered alert. But keep in mind, this is just within the first few days here, and the search would continue, and they're going to bring in experts as well. Investigators are speaking with family, friends, and teachers at Community Elementary School, where the children attended, Helm said. The children's status was changed from dead to missing by Sheriff Randall Boyce. So initially, they did think that the children were deceased. Boyce said that he still believes the children had been lost in the fire, suggesting the extremely high temperatures reached in the blaze may have eliminated any traces of their bodies. And I've seen interviews with him. I've seen other places where he's been quoted. He seems to be holding on to this belief, maybe even still currently. I mean, I haven't seen anything that recent, but it's a very strong belief for him that there was some element. I think he was on scene and he basically saw how this thing came down. Because of the way the house was built, there was this large basement area. And once everything started burning from the center, the walls literally all closed in. Like, everything fell into itself, into the center. And his thought on that is, once those walls closed in, that, the heat that would have been generated, because think those objects are already hot. They've been, cooking in this fire for maybe a few hours at this point before the walls all actually fall in. Think of the heat there. Think of the heat that's happening within the flames. Maybe a combination of all that would have been enough to cremate the remains. I believe. I'm trying to paraphrase his belief. I'm stitching it across several different comments that I've seen him make. So I just want to be clear about that. I am paraphrasing there, but. So Chloie Leverette does also go by the name Chloe Pope, as noted here. I'm still not 100% sure what that's about. I know that Chloe and Gage have different fathers, so it might be that that's her father's name. I think there might be some hard feelings in terms of their mother at this point. I mean, there's obviously a big question of why these children are not living with their mother. They're living with the grandparents, and I don't believe the mother is living there at this time. Children were last seen by a neighbor at 6:30 on Sunday. Agents searched the fire scene as cadaver dogs from Stewart County Emergency Management Agency sniffed piles of burnt wreckage and the remains of the home's basement. So that's another little checkbox. And admittedly, we've learned a lot about dogs and how those searches may not go exactly as strongly as we would hope, but they did bring cadaver dogs out very quickly there. And they're saying they've hit on a few areas, and we've gone back and searched. Bedford County Fire Chief Mark Thomas said, some of what we found has been sent to be tested to see if it's human remains. We also found some teeth. The state fire marshal took them to a dentist to see if they're from a human. Now, as far as I know, looking through all the research that I have, there's no information I can see that has been questionable in terms of any of the remains that they found. And they're still sticking by, as recently as a few years ago, they're still making comments that no remains for either child has been found in any of this. There are other remains that have been found because there were a few pets that were also killed in this. We brought out the debris of the home piece by piece, Thomas said. Since the debris was removed and rearranged, we thought we'd bring in a crew that specialized in that. Stewart County's crew was heavily involved in inspecting debris from the World Trade Center. So we have people that know how to get this done, know how to process this. We wanted to make sure we covered everything thoroughly and make sure nothing was left behind, Thomas said. We searched thoroughly Tuesday and feel like we got everything. The Tennessee Highway Patrol sent a helicopter to search the area. So just on the thought, okay, what if this fire started, the kids go running off? They searched over the fire scene and looked into the areas around it to see if the kids could have escaped and collapsed somewhere. I think they also used infrared to detect heat signatures while they were doing that. They did not find children in the immediate area. And this is just a little scene. Apparently this went on for the better part of this week. Some other things that I'm reading say that there were multiple searches done of these materials. But look, these are sifters. They're literally taking shovel by shovel of the remaining soot, dust, ash, and they're processing it, looking for anything in terms of remains related to not only these children, but the other victims in this house. Not knowing is the hardest part, said Mary Lamb, who is the sister of Leon McLaren. We want to know where these children are, if they were in the fire or if they were taken, she said. Family members and reporters were kept back from the home, which has taken on the appearance of an archaeological dig. Heavy machinery lifted bulky pieces of debris. Large sifting tray tables were set up while workers filled a half dozen wheelbarrows with fine material from the fire. It was still not clear what caused the fire, which burned for hours, in part because firefighters had trouble getting water to the remote location. Apparently they did not have a fire. There's no fire hydrant on that street, and they were literally like trucking water in from wherever they could get it. Helm said investigators determined Molly McLaren was a children's grandmother. That's something that comes up as a bit of a question in all this. This article even saying Tennessee children missing after house fire kills step-grandparents. I kept seeing that term over, step-grandparents. Kind of dug in just a little more. I do have Molly's obituary here. There wasn't really an obituary posted for Leon that I could find, although we can see he also goes by the name Bubba here. Mrs. Molly Woods McLaren, age 70, of the Rover community of Bedford County, died Sunday evening, September 23rd, from injuries sustained in a house fire. Her husband of 35 years, Albert Leon Bubba McLaren, age 72, also perished in the fire. She was a homemaker and retired from American Can Company of Shelbyville after 30 years of service. Mrs. McLaren was a member of Rover Baptist Church and a member of the Red Hat Club. She's survived by children, and it names several children, including Cheryl Leverette Daniel. That is the mother of both the children. So from what I understand, basically it is Leon that is a step-grandfather in the situation, but biological grandmother. Helmstead investigators determined Molly McLaren was a children's grandmother. Agents have interviewed Cheryl Leverette, the mother of the youngsters, and Christopher Daniel, Gage's father. Chloe's father is deceased, she said. So far, authorities haven't gotten any new leads. Forensics expert Dr. William Bass, who founded the Body Farm Research Center at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, said even in an intense fire, some bones and teeth should remain. Finding them could be difficult, though, because the fragments might only be a few inches long. Family members aren't sure what to think. Daniel, Gage's father, said he believed the children were in the house when it caught fire, but he was holding out hope that they might be found alive. The State Department of Children's Services investigated the mother of the two children and Daniel's father between 2006 and 2010, said spokesman Brandon G., although it wasn't clear whether that led to the children staying with the couple at the farmhouse. So parents being investigated, and the only comments I could really find on that were from the children's mother, and she was basically being clear that she was struggling with addiction through this time period. And I think that's part of the decision that led to the children living with the grandparents. She has come full 180 on that, and she is now a certified peer recovery specialist. She's helping other people stay clean. So that's the story around why the kids were living with the grandparents to begin with. Lamb, so they're talking about Leon, the step-grandfather's sister, described Gage, whom the family called Buster, as the sweetest little boy. She said he was a special needs child who followed Leon McLaren everywhere and especially loved to ride with him on the Gator, a small utility vehicle. She said Chloe would play with one of her young cousins who lived in a neighboring home. One day, the two of them came up to me in the dirtiest little swimsuits, and I said, "Where have you been?" because I knew there were no ponds around. They had been in the cattle trough, she said, laughing. Both the children loved the farm life, in particular the animals that included a white pony, a herd of goats, chickens, and dogs. At least one dog died in the fire, misleading investigators early on into thinking its carcass was the body of one of the children. I believe that was a poodle, so it would have been a very small dog on top of that. Continuing at ABC News, if we just had ashes, their little bodies, but we don't have anything, Mary Lamb said. Former FBI agent Brad Garrett said that in these kinds of cases, if the children are kidnapped, it's typically by someone they know. And now we have a little bit better understanding of the farm, and honestly, we're talking a herd of goats, some chickens, one pony. It could be that is just being kept by the family, by the grandparents that are living there. That doesn't necessarily sound to me like they're doing any type of farming that would, really bring in any profit for them. But they have such a big parcel of land, who knows? Maybe they're growing hay, maybe they have people come and help them with that. The other possibility, which we've seen in some cases, is it could be people that are coming to the house to provide services in some way. We already know that there was no fire hydrant. There's another development that we're going to find in terms of other possible fuel that was being stored in the house. So it just makes me wonder about what type of people might have been showing up regularly for deliveries and things like that. Back to Brad Garrett's statements here, in most of these situations, statistically, children this age, over 90% of the time are taken by their own parents or a close relative. So we know that TBI is all over the parents of these children. They don't have them. Now, is there possibly something where the parents could have taken the children to someone else? We have seen that happen in certain cases. I could tell you that their father comments for a few years and then kind of just falls out of the media spotlight, but their mother has remained pretty strongly in the media spotlight all these years, asking, where her children are. And an Amber Alert is issued eventually. This would happen a few days later, it looks like. And there's something interesting about this Amber Alert, and a big thank you to the WebSleuths community, because I learned this from reading through the threads there. When the Amber Alert is issued, there's an interesting condition in it. According to the Amber Alert release, authorities believe the children may be with a male, though no description has been provided. Just makes me wonder if there's more information in this case that just hasn't been released publicly. And the other thing is, for Amber Alerts, there's several conditions that have to be met for those to be kicked on. And usually, well, first of all, there has to be an imminent threat. So if they were considering these children may have been removed from this house where these two other people were murdered and then the place was burnt down, would that be an imminent threat? Absolutely. There's no confirmation of the house at the point that this Amber Alert is being released as being burned down by arson. So it's interesting to me that they were kind of able to even squeeze off an Amber Alert, but also typically, at least for the ones that I see here locally in Minnesota, they have to have some form of information about a vehicle they're looking for, or some kind of description that it's not enough to enable or to try to tell the public, hey, we've got these kids that are missing. There usually has to be something actionable in the information. And this Amber Alert, based on the descriptions I can find of it, really doesn't have any of that. It's literally just the two kids, their basic stats, and this one note, which, by the way, is, you can see here, I'm bringing this back from Web Archive. It's pretty much been erased from the internet at this point. This one note about their potentially the kids being taken by a male. So I'm curious if there was some lead that maybe investigators had early on. Maybe there was some delivery person that was thought to be suspicious, or someone that was around the home in some other way that was thought to be suspicious. And maybe they're not in the spotlight anymore. If they are, considering the age of this case, this is John's ringing his usual bell here. I think we're getting along with this case where they should release some information that helps the public help them back. It's the same thing that I'm always trying to just wave the flag for with law enforcement. Basically, most of the information about this case comes out in the first year. Very minor updates that happen after that on the anniversaries. And by year 5, there's basically no new information that's coming out. And we're well past year 5 at this point. So if there is something helpful that the public can bring to law enforcement, the right question or piece of information hasn't been spun out here yet for us to be able to help them. That's always the thing I'm kind of looking for as I'm looking through this information. Where's those gaps? This might be one of them. If there was a male, just give us some, and you don't have to say we know that it was a particular person, this was their job, this is their name, and this is their address. But it could be something along the lines of, we believe they might have been taken from a male, someone that was known to be in the area, possibly in this type of vehicle, just some additional scraps of information that could be helpful here. Because unfortunately, we haven't gotten the job done in terms of helping them yet. Missing Tennessee kid's father, they don't think that they burned up in the fire. There are a few clues in the search for 2 missing Tennessee children. I don't know what to think. Christopher Daniel, Gage's father, told the AP. They don't think they burned up in the fire. The way I took it, they don't. And I think that's pretty clear. There's enough comments outside of, we do have the local sheriff that might be holding on to his belief that they did. And even, that TBI, the spokesperson in the beginning, it sounded like they might have been on the fence, but all of what I would consider the experts in this situation, the fire marshal, the arson investigators, the people they pulled in that worked on the World Trade Center disaster, terrorist disaster. It's not enough to call it a disaster. Those experts are not lining up with the kids possibly burning up in the house, and there being absolutely no remains that could be found. And from what I'm seeing, there was multiple searches that were done, different phases of that searching that were worked on, and they never found anything. Police are questioning everyone who knew the kids, including their parents, but investigators said they have no suspects and aren't even sure they have a crime. So that's making this really, really tough. The key in this case is the origin of the fire, said Garrett. Is it an accident or is it intentional? And that is such a big question that really would push this case in one of two directions. We're looking at two strong possibilities here. Either the kids have been removed from the house or they were never removed from the house. And the answer to that question really pushes that possibility strongly in either direction. Unfortunately, as we get a few months away from the event here, the information that might be helpful to us, not just answering about the arson investigation, but the autopsies of the grandparents, just don't come back with anything that's really helpful. Autopsies clear up little. The cause of death for a Bedford County couple found dead in a house fire nearly 3 months ago remains unknown. According to autopsy reports, the cause and manner of death could not be determined, although the remains were severely charred and soot was found in their airways. Now, I just want to stop on that point for a moment, because soot being found in their airways would suggest that they were breathing, they were inhaling as the fire was happening. That doesn't mean that they weren't incapacitated in some way. They could have even been fatally injured and just hadn't expired fully yet as the fire was going on. So when I first saw that, I kind of had a strong inkling of, is this the piece I'm looking for? Oh, that's it. Well, if there was soot in their airways, they were alive during the fire. A little more thought on that, and I'm not feeling as strongly about that. The cause of the fire, not been determined. Tennessee Bureau of Investigation spokeswoman Kristen Helm said the fire's damage to the remains likely made it hard to determine what's for certain what killed the couple. According to the medical examiner's report, both remains had to be identified by X-rays and DNA analysis. Toxicology reports were also ordered. Molly McLaren's report said that she had morphine and aprazolam in her system, a drug that's used to treat anxiety. But Mary Lamb, the sister of Leon, had an explanation for that. She said that her sister-in-law had been diagnosed with breast cancer several years ago and it had returned. So that's why she would have been taking an anti-anxiety medication. TBI agents continue to follow up on leads and tips about the two children, but no active searches are ongoing, Helm said. The calls and leads tend to decrease as time passes. We're getting very few. Lamb said donations are being collected at a local church for a reward. I've only seen mentions of the reward that kind of survived thanks again to the WebSleuths thread. They were saying that about $1,500 was raised and offered. I don't know if that's still there. I would think just Crime Stoppers has, I think, a basic reward in that area. But I'm not aware of any active rewards currently. I don't want Chloie and Gage to be forgotten, Lamb said. Someone knows where those children are, she said. Fortunately, we get to the first year that passes. 1 year after Cheryl, Leverette, Daniel's children were last seen, she holds on to hopes of seeing them again. We know that the children were not victims of the fire, she said, naming a long list of law enforcement agencies and forensic specialists that have found no traces of remains. I want people to pray for them, that guardian angels are watching over them. Prayer and the Lord have kept me going. It's enough losing my parents, but for my kids to be missing? We miss our parents very much so. Sheriff Randall Boyce said a year of hoping and searching has been hard on him and his officers as well. We've lost more sleep over this than anything else since I've been sheriff. When it's children, it touches home with all of us guys. I have grandchildren the same age. It touches our hearts. We're still getting a few leads from people who think they know something. We still keep looking and hoping something turns up. But one grim possibility exists according to investigators. And here's Boyce. There's still that possibility that they burned up in the fire. The mother, Daniel, doesn't see it that way at all. They found the bones of my parents and the bones of a bird, but no bones of my children, she said. And she's talking about a pet bird that they had as well. It's like after people saw the headline, 4 dead in fire, they gave up looking for them because they, law enforcement, said they were dead. I don't want people to give up looking. They were not victims of the fire. Boyce understands her feelings. We're going to continue to look. We're not going to take it for granted that they died. We're going to continue to look until we find something solid one way or the other. Daniel's hopes remain strong. Everyone, please keep looking for them. Don't give up on them. They are out there somewhere. And we get to 6 years later. The children are still missing. Their mother still believes that they're alive. With so many possessions stuffed inside the home, it burned hot and quickly. Fire investigators later recovered their remains along with their dog and pet bird. I believe someone took them from the house, and in order for that to happen, something had to happen to my parents, she said. The family has sold the land where the blaze occurred. If Gage and Chloie were in the house at the time of the fire, it burned so hot that it disintegrated their bodies. Cremations occur at around 1500 degrees, but fire experts say it's unlikely the house got that hot. I looked into it a bit more too, and I'm seeing variations. First of all, this would be a low number that I'd be expecting for a cremation. I also looked a little bit today into house fires, and from what I'm seeing, those average around 1100 degrees. So we kind of have one number that seems like it's being skewed down a little bit, the other number kind of being skewed up a little bit. Does that meet in a point where it makes sense? Fire experts are saying it's unlikely that the house got that hot. I just feel that they're still out there. When it first happened, I had a mother's intuition that they were not dead, she said. I'm worried. I am scared. I let the anger go because it was doing nothing but eating me inside. Leon's sister Mary thinks, first they went in and set the house on fire. My brother and sister-in-law, I believe, were murdered, and then they took the children. So she also has strong beliefs that the kids are still out there. And here would be one of the updates of multiple passes on the age progressions. Investigators were never able to determine the cause or origin of the fire. And that's troubling in a few ways, because you would assume if it was arson that there would be some explanation for that. Now, I thought I had it marked up for you guys, but I haven't hit it yet. So if I hit it later, I'm sorry. One of the things that seems to contribute to the fire is there was a number of propane tanks that were in the basement. And some people are wondering, like, why was there, apparently there was like between 10 to 20. There was a ton of propane tanks in the basement. Some people are wondering why was that down there? Again, I have to keep in mind this is a rural area. It could have been that was, those were materials that were used for some aspect of living out there that I'm just not familiar with. So that could have certainly helped in accelerating what was going on with this fire. The things that I'm getting caught up on is, for arson, usually there has to be an accelerant that's used, and that's how it's kind of traced. That's how they're able to go back and say, well, the way these things burned, it was clear that there was some kind of accelerant that was used on these items. They're not able to do that here. On the flip side, for fires that do happen outside of arson, usually they're able to trace back, there was a bad electrical cable. We found the spot in the wall where the fire started because we could see, how it burned out. Now, it could be with this particular case, the destruction of the building hindered that investigation, combined with what was a recovery effort that would happen right on the heels of that fire. Basically, as soon as they could get in there, that they were working on recovering those bodies. So it makes me wonder if those things are kind of combining to put this case in a position where, unfortunately, the arson investigation couldn't progress. Explaining the mystery, Dr. Mike Tabor, chief odontologist for the Tennessee Medical Examiner's Office, said, "We were not able to find any remains in the house fire that belonged to the children, so now we wonder, where are these children?" Another expert, he believes that at the very least, identifiable teeth would have turned up. And I didn't want to get too graphic with you guys, but there was remains that were found at different times because of what happened with the fire, with the building collapsing, with the rescue effort, and they were able to assign those remains to the right victim. All of those remains tied back to the grandparents or the two pets that were lost. Very small dog and a very small bird. It's kind of hard to ignore these points for me. Daniel said that the family's in regular contact with investigators, and she added, "We want Chloie and Gage to know that we love them very much, very, very much. They're always in my heart, always in my mind, and they are my soul. I hope whoever has taken them is taking good care of them and will please bring them home." Another expert was on the Unsolved Mysteries podcast. They did an episode on this case. I'll have a link to that in the description box down below for you guys. Dr. Hugh Berryman, professor and director of the Forensic Institute for Research and Education at Middle Tennessee State University, told Unsolved Mysteries that the likelihood of a body burning up completely without leaving a trace for investigators to find is extremely low. Quote, "It's been my experience that most house fires, people think that the bodies just burn up. I hate to use it's impossible, but it's almost impossible to destroy a human body in a house fire. There's going to be something left." The mother here saying her theory is that it was arson. They said that the fire had aired and vented through the door that was left open in the basement. I had to read that a couple times because I was like, wait a minute. So the basement door was open? They knew this, the investigators did. Bubba, her father, was adamant about every night checking to make sure that that basement door was locked before he went to bed. Every night. That was his routine, his habit, because that's where he kept his tools. Somebody had to open that door to let it vent. That was an eye-opener for me. I believe it was arson. And because of everything that's happened with Chloie and Gage being missing and not being in that house fire, it was intentional. I don't know the layout of the house, but I'm also wondering if that door was usually locked and it was opened, could that have been the path that someone would escape from if they were in the house conducting this kidnapping? In a really interesting, heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time twist, their mother starts this annual vigil of sorts, but it's a birthday party for her children. Birthday party held for Bedford County kids missing nearly 7 years. Such a beautiful thought, almost in the same way that you might consider, instead of a funeral, you would have a celebration of life. I love turning the tables on grief in that way. And just what a great way to keep the awareness raised, get the press out there, get another round of coverage about this case. An Amber Alert for the kids is still active from the TBI. New age progression photos got released. While it may feel like a helpless situation, this family is treating it like it's not. In an effort to keep their memory and the case alive, they celebrated their birthday, hoping and praying someone will see their faces and report a tip. And here is a picture from one of those birthday celebrations. Over at Fox 17, new age progression photos get released in 2020. And a little more information here. 8 years later, the Amber Alert remains active, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children have released new age progression photos. Amber Alerts do not expire, TBI spokeswoman Leslie Earhart said. They remain active until we have definitive information concerning the child's whereabouts. So, yeah, these alerts not going anywhere. And I looked at a list of several of the alerts for this area and saw a familiar face. I forgot that it was Tennessee where Summer Wells also disappeared. Her Amber Alert also still active. Amber Alert still active 10 years after Tennessee kids disappeared. New age progressions as of 2022. So a big thank you to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They keep updating the progressions, and every time they do that, look, there's another round of news coverage that happens on this. Very thankful for them doing that, and that's why we support them monthly. We have for years, and will continue to do so. Over at News Channel 5, some comments from their mother to try to round out this conversation. There used to be a lot of fond memories. Now, there's just a lot of heartache. They say time heals. It doesn't. It pacifies for a moment. The longer they've been gone, the harder it's gotten for me. There's no way to describe the hell that I live in every day. I may never see justice here on earth, but there's Judgment Day, and everybody has to answer. Nobody wants to feel what I feel. I don't know where they are at in this situation, but I want them to know we love them, and I'll never give up. I laid this at God's feet a long time ago. I still have faith. I still have hope. In His time, the truth will be revealed. One way or another, I will see them again. And as I mentioned, a few links in the description box down below for you guys, the Unsolved Mysteries podcast episode on it, as well as WebSleuths. And a big thank you to both of them and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children for trying to keep the awareness raised on this case. So if you're like me, there's this weird belief that I'm stuck in where I still want to consider the possibility that they didn't get out of the house, but all of the experts that we're running into are just saying it's just not possible. Some trace would have been found. Some element of the remains would have been found. And considering what they did find, a poodle, a cockatiel, it's hard to argue that. How can you? And if you have experts saying that, I mean, look, I deal with families all the time, and keeping hope alive is part of what they need to do to get through the day. I understand that. But this is one of those cases where it's not just a family's belief structure that is comforting grief for them or something along those lines. They literally have experts, like you heard the description. She's got a list. She could rattle off the list. This person said this person said that. They keep having this reinforced. And because of that, I can't ignore the possibility that these two kids are out there. What has happened? Why haven't they been able to get back in touch? That's the question. Were they taken from the home? Did something happen to them after that? I'm concerned about that. But the getting to that possibility is really tough when we have just no information that supports that law enforcement's even really looking in that direction. I mean, they're saying it. They're saying that they're open to everything, but we don't know that it's arson 100%. So with that, the question of, is there a kidnapping that's wrapped up in here? Is this really just a fire that broke out in a house where maybe there was too much stuff packed into the house? There was, it sounds like the basement was used basically as a garage. Was there other accelerants down there that, I mean, we don't even know where the fire started. If the fire started in the basement, that could have gotten to those types of objects and could have escalated things very, very quickly. I don't know. At the end of all this, I'm trying to make sense of the fire and the disappearance. And because we can't answer the fire, it makes the disappearance so much harder to understand. So that's where I'm going to leave it for conversation with you guys in the comments down below. And as always, I ask we please keep it respectful. But I am curious on that point I raised earlier. If these two children are now adults, one of them 21 years old, what would stop them from getting in touch, at least with law enforcement, to get this case put away and the search called off and the Amber Alert shut down? I'm curious to see your thoughts on that, so please tell me about it in the comments down below. A big thank you to everyone that supports us here at the Lord and Arts channel. We don't jam these presentations with commercials. We can only do that because of our amazing supporters. If you'd like to become one, please visit lordandarts.com. There you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even just buy us a coffee. If you have friends in Tennessee, please share this video with them. We want to keep the awareness raised to this case. You heard it from their mother. Someone knows something. There might be some information that's just out there waiting for the right trigger. This video might be it. So please do share this video. And if you're the person that has that information, please be brave enough to call it in. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend. And please join us again here next week for another mystery on the Lord and Arts channel.